Imagine this, you're walking into work, coffee in hand, feeling composed. Suddenly someone makes a sarcastic remark. It's minor, technically, but it's designed to sting. And for the next hour it echoes in your mind louder than it ever deserved. That's the hidden power we give others, access to our emotional center. This is what the Stoics feared most, not insults themselves, but the invisible strings they pull inside us. When someone else's words have the power to shape your day, your mind is no longer yours. Marcus Aurelius didn't flinch from this truth. He faced it head on. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. So why do we react so intensely? Because we forget what belongs to us and what doesn't. Someone's temper, their disrespect, their need to be right, these are not your burdens to carry. The Stoics saw anger not as strength, but as borrowed chaos. It looks like fire, but burns the one who holds it. Seneca once wrote that anger is temporary insanity. He didn't say that to sound poetic. He meant it literally. In anger, we become distorted versions of ourselves, less thoughtful, more reactive, and often embarrassingly wrong, and yet it always feels justified in the moment. That's what makes it so deceptive. It's not just the offense that traps us. It's our belief that responding emotionally is a form of self-respect. But Stoicism offers an alternate path, not suppression, but sovereignty. You don't bottle the feeling. You observe it, understand it, and then choose a response based on your values, not your impulse. That pause, that moment between stimulus and response, that's your kingdom. Now imagine the opposite. Someone insults you and you don't flinch. You hear the words, you recognize the intention, and yet nothing shifts inside you. That's not coldness, that's clarity. And clarity is what Stoics cultivated above all else. Epictetus taught that it's not the event itself that hurts us, but our opinion about it. Words, after all, are just vibrations in the air. It's the meaning we assign that creates the wound. You can't stop people from being petty, rude, or dramatic, but you can decide not to turn their words into chains. This doesn't mean becoming passive or indifferent. It means becoming deliberate. The Stoic isn't unmoved because they don't feel. They're unmoved because they've trained their mind to respond, not react. They hold their dignity higher than their pride. Marcus Aurelius began each morning with a ritual, preparing for annoyance. Today, he wrote, I will meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, arrogant. But instead of dreading it, he welcomed it. Why? Because it reminded him that his peace must be internally built, not externally borrowed. Think of it like building a house on bedrock. Every time you resist the urge to lash out, to clap back, or to internalize a slight, you're adding a stone to your foundation. Over time, it becomes unshakable. This is why the Stoic isn't concerned with being right. They're concerned with being free. Free from the need to prove something. Free from the reflex to defend their ego. Free from the emotional roller coaster that others live on daily. Someone once said that peace is not the absence of chaos, but the presence of clarity in the middle of it. And that's what this mindset offers. Not immunity to offense, but independence from it. Because true resilience isn't about being hard, it's about being whole. The Stoic path isn't rigid. It bends, but it doesn't break. It feels, but it doesn't flail. And when you live like that, people notice. Not because you shout louder, but because nothing rattles you. That's what Stoicism trains. Not numbness, but noble calm. Not detachment, but discernment. And not arrogance, but anchored awareness. That's the mindset that makes you untouchable. The truth is, no one escapes insults. Not the Stoics, not you, not even the wise. But what separates us isn't what happens to us. It's what we do next. The person who reacts immediately gives the world their remote control. The person who pauses, they keep it. And here's what most people miss. That pause is a skill, not a personality trait. You can practice it like anything else. Begin with one breath before the reply, one breath before you accept the bait. That breath is the gateway to mastery. The Stoics weren't emotionless statues. They were warriors of the inner world. They felt everything, but they trained themselves to filter emotion through principle. That's what made them strong, not their silence, but their discipline. So the next time someone mocks you, dismisses you, or tries to drag you into their storm, remember, it's not silence that protects you. It's sovereignty. Let others throw words. You build walls of perspective. Build a mind so anchored that no insult can trespass. Because once your mind becomes your ally, the world loses its grip. And the best part, you don't need anyone's permission to live this way. You don't need approval to protect your calm. You don't need agreement to walk away in silence. Because peace isn't granted, it's chosen. Every moment you choose restraint over reaction, you train a different part of yourself. The part that's grounded, not grasping. And over time, that version becomes your default. Not out of effort, out of habit, out of identity. Most people think self-control is about suppressing emotions, but the Stoics saw it differently. It's not about denial, it's about redirection. Anger doesn't vanish just because you pretend it isn't there. Instead, you reshape it into something useful. That's what discipline really is, not numbing your humanity, but steering it towards something higher. Epictetus, a man who endured slavery, said it best, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When someone disrespects you, your first instinct might be to reclaim power by reacting. But in doing so, you hand them the reins. They become the puppeteer, and your emotions dance to their tune. The Stoic doesn't deny the pull of anger, they just don't obey it. Instead of retaliating, they respond. That difference between reaction and response is where all the power lives. A reaction is quick, emotional, and usually regrettable. A response is slow, thoughtful, and grounded in values, not ego. When you respond instead of react, you don't just preserve your peace, you project strength. Not performative strength, not loud strength, real strength. The kind that makes people pause and say, "I can't shake them." That's Stoicism in action. Imagine someone cuts you off mid-sentence during a meeting. Your face gets hot, your jaw tightens, but instead of snapping, you take a breath, you wait. Then you say what you meant to say, clearly, calmly. You don't lower yourself to their level. You remind them and yourself that you don't need dominance to hold ground. This isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Now let's talk about boundaries. Stoics weren't doormats. They didn't just take it. They set firm lines, but without drama. A boundary doesn't need volume. It needs clarity. When someone crosses a line, you can let them know, calmly, directly, without needing them to validate your reaction. You can say, "That doesn't work for me," or "I'm not comfortable with that." That's enough. You don't owe explanations for your peace. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." So next time someone tries to drag you down, resist the urge to mirror them. Rise instead. Show them a model of what strength looks like when it's no longer trying to prove itself. Over time, your silence won't just protect you. It will teach others, not because they're afraid of you, but because they see there's nothing to gain from shaking your calm. You become unprofitable to provoke. And in a world fueled by outrage, that's the ultimate power. People often assume calmness is passivity, but calmness, as the Stoics knew, is resistance, refined. It's a conscious refusal to let the external world dictate your internal state. It's the quiet rebellion against emotional hijacking. Each time you choose to remain steady in the face of disrespect, you're not suppressing yourself. You're protecting your sovereignty. That decision, small as it may seem in the moment, builds an identity over time. You go from someone who reacts to someone who leads with principle. But here's what most people miss. Restraint is not repression. Stoicism doesn't ask you to swallow pain and pretend it's fine. It invites you to process that pain with honesty, then act from clarity, not confusion. You're not hiding your feelings, you're organizing them. This is where journaling becomes a weapon. It's not just a self-help tool. It's a clearinghouse for emotion. It gives you space to ask, why did that bother me? What was I afraid of losing in that moment? And that kind of reflection is how you stop being a slave to your triggers. When something cuts deep, a betrayal, a dismissal, an unfair judgment, your first instinct might be to call it out. But sometimes the most powerful move is observation. Watch how people act when they think you're not reacting. Watch what they reveal when your silence doesn't give them feedback. That's when people expose their intentions. So keep your standards, yes. Speak your truth when necessary, yes. But don't spend your peace explaining your worth. Let your presence, steady, composed, and unbothered, do the talking. That is the ultimate Stoic flex. And here's something unexpected. When you stop reacting to every jab, every rude glance, every dismissive tone, people begin to notice. Not because you're trying to be noticed, but because you're showing them something rare. They see someone who doesn't flinch, someone who chooses stillness over spectacle. This is leadership without the podium. Stoic calm isn't coldness, it's presence. It's the refusal to be pulled into emotional games. And once people see that you're not moved by provocation, they change how they interact with you. They adapt because they know you're not playing by the same emotional script. You've upgraded the script entirely. So next time someone tries to throw you off balance, remember this: their chaos is not your invitation. Your stillness is your reply. And that reply is worth more than 1,000 clever comebacks. There's a common myth that emotional strength means bottling things up, staying quiet, keeping a straight face, pushing everything down like a robot in a suit. But the Stoics never said, don't feel. What they taught, and what we so often forget, is feel fully, but don't let your feelings decide for you. That's why discipline isn't just a practice. It's freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This wasn't motivational fluff. It was a command to train, reflect, and refine the only territory you'll ever fully own, your own thoughts. So where do you start? Every day, before the world spins you into noise, train your mind like an athlete trains their body. Meditation, journaling, silence. These aren't soft habits, they are mental weightlifting. Meditation teaches you to observe, not react. It's the pause between impulse and decision. Journaling isn't about becoming poetic, it's about becoming precise. When you write your thoughts down, you hold them still long enough to see what's driving them. Fear, ego, insecurity, or clarity. And self-reflection, that's where the heavy lifting begins. Noticing where you slipped, noticing what triggered you. Then, without judgment, choosing a better path tomorrow. Try this simple exercise. At the end of each day, ask yourself 3 questions. 1. When did I let someone else control my peace? 2. What story was I telling myself in that moment? And 3. How could I respond next time in a way that aligns with the person I want to be? If you do that for a week, you'll be shocked at how much mental clutter clears. You'll see your own patterns, your own traps, and, most importantly, your own progress. Because here's the secret no one tells you. Emotional strength is boring. It's not a dramatic monologue or a viral clapback. It's quiet, it's invisible. It's the moment you feel the old you rising, and you choose not to let it win. So if you want to be unshakable, start where the Stoics started, with discipline. You don't need a 5 a.m. cold plunge or a bulletproof coffee routine. You need a few quiet minutes each day to meet yourself honestly, to see what's true, to catch your thoughts before they catch you. And if you really want to go further, take on this challenge. For the next 7 days, when someone frustrates you, pause, breathe, respond with calm, and later write down what you learned from that moment. Not what they did, but what you discovered about yourself. This is how you train peace, not by avoiding life, but by sharpening your response to it. And the best part, the more you do it, the less effort it takes. Eventually, calm becomes your default, not because you're suppressing emotions, but because you've stopped outsourcing your power to anyone else's chaos. This is what the Stoics knew, that the war was never with the world. It was always with your own reaction to it, and when you master that, you become untouchable. 4. Respond with indifference. The Stoics knew a simple truth. The one who angers you controls you. Responding with indifference doesn't mean you don't care. It means you refuse to surrender control of your mind to another person's emotions. Indifference is not weakness. It's the strength to remain grounded while storms swirl around you. Epictetus taught that if someone insults you and it's true, then thank them. They've done you a favor. And if it's false, why be upset by a lie? In either case, your peace remains intact. That is the real victory. But indifference takes practice. It's not about pretending to be stoic. It's about actually detaching your worth from someone else's opinion. That quiet pause between stimulus and response, that's where indifference lives. And that pause can change your life. So the next time someone tries to provoke you with a look, a comment, a slight, remind yourself their behavior is not a command. You do not owe them your outrage. You owe yourself your clarity. Let them burn with frustration. Let them spin in their drama. You stay still. Let your silence echo louder than any comeback ever could, because in that moment, you've already won. Now here's something the Stoics understood deeply. People often provoke others not to express themselves, but to extract a reaction. Why? Because reactions feed ego. If you react, they win. If you don't, they're left facing their own emptiness. Imagine a coworker rolling their eyes during your presentation. Your usual instinct might be to explain yourself, argue, or shoot back a sharp comment. But what if you didn't? What if you just continued calm and steady, like their opinion didn't even register? That's indifference in action, and it disarms them more than any verbal blow ever could. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb. It means gaining such control over your inner world that no one can hijack it. The real power is subtle. It's not about ignoring people out of pride. It's about conserving your energy for things that actually matter. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." Let that sink in. It's not just about what others do. It's about what you allow to live in your mind. You're not made of glass. You're not at the mercy of moods and the noise. You're the observer of it all. When someone throws verbal sparks at you, don't become kindling. Become stone. Let it hit. Let it bounce off. Let it fall flat. Because in the end, the person who walks away calm, that's the person everyone remembers. Not the loudest one, not the angriest one. The one who didn't need to react at all. 5. Practice negative visualization. At first glance, visualizing failure or misfortune sounds pessimistic, even a little dark. But the Stoics believed the opposite. They called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, and they used it not to dwell in misery, but to build unshakable resilience. Here's the idea. If you prepare your mind for what could go wrong, then when it actually does, you're not shaken. You're ready. Marcus Aurelius did this every morning. He reminded himself that he would encounter rude, selfish, or ignorant people, not to be cynical, but to stay calm. Negative visualization is mental armor. You're not inviting bad things in. You're rehearsing how to meet them with strength. If someone insults you, you've already imagined it. If a plan fails, you've already walked through the feeling. You don't panic, you pivot. Imagine waking up and before grabbing your phone, you ask, "What's one challenge I might face today?" Then play it out in your mind, calmly, without drama. You train your nervous system to respond instead of react, and that habit becomes a fortress. It's not about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming emotionally prepared. The Stoics didn't fear pain. They studied it, they rehearsed it, so that life couldn't blindside them. In a world that changes by the minute, that kind of preparation isn't paranoia, it's wisdom. Now think about how modern life wires us. We expect things to go smoothly, deliveries on time, people to be polite, apps to never crash. And when things go wrong, we're shocked, irritated, thrown off balance. But the Stoics knew life isn't smooth, and people aren't perfect. Negative visualization trains us to expect friction, not in a cynical way, but in a strategic way. It removes the element of surprise, a delayed train already anticipated, a partner snapping at you after a long day, already rehearsed. You don't spiral, you adjust. And it's not just about external events. You can visualize internal struggles too. What if I feel anxious today? What if I lose focus? What if I make a mistake? This doesn't make you weak, it makes you ready. Like an athlete visualizing the race before the starting gun. The modern world glorifies positive thinking, but the Stoics practiced balanced thinking. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And here's the twist. This practice doesn't make you sadder, it makes you more grateful, because when something does go right, you've already imagined the alternative. That missed opportunity could have been worse. That rude comment, you were ready for it. And now, instead of feeling victimized, you feel composed. Because you didn't build your peace on perfection. You built it on preparation. Negative visualization is not weakness. It's not pessimism. It's emotional strength. The kind that doesn't break when the world does what it always does. Surprise you. 6. Strengthen your mind through daily discipline. Stoicism is not something you believe. It's something you do, daily. Not in theory, but in practice. In the small, unseen choices you make every day. The Stoics treated the mind like a muscle. If you don't train it, it atrophies. If you don't stretch it, it stiffens. The goal was never to live without difficulty. It was to meet difficulty with strength you've built ahead of time. That's why Marcus Aurelius journaled, why Epictetus taught in short, repeatable lessons, why Seneca wrote letters to friends, not just to share wisdom, but to strengthen his own. They weren't preaching from ivory towers, they were practicing. Modern life throws distractions at you faster than you can blink. Notifications, news cycles, doom scrolling, and every one of those pulls you further from yourself. So how do you build inner strength? Not by scrolling for quotes, but by carving out 10 minutes a day to sit with your own thoughts. Journal what angered you, what tempted you, what made you proud. Over time, you stop reacting to life like a gust of wind and start responding like a steady flame. Discipline isn't loud, it's not flashy, but over time, it gives you the kind of inner clarity that can't be disturbed by someone else's noise. That's the goal, not to be untouchable in public, but unshakable in private. Start with one thing, wake up at the same time every day, not because it's trendy, but because it teaches you that you're in charge of yourself. Then build from there. 5 minutes of journaling, 2 minutes of deep breathing, one difficult task done without delay. You're not trying to impress anyone, you're trying to build a mind that can't be hijacked by impulse. That's what discipline gives you. Control, not just over your time, but over your reactions, your emotions, your life. The Stoics didn't wait for ideal conditions. They trained for the real ones. And so can you. Not tomorrow, not next week, today, one action at a time. Discipline isn't about punishing yourself. It's about setting a rhythm, a steady drumbeat that keeps you grounded when life gets chaotic. Think of it as a quiet rebellion against the distraction of the world. Start noticing your own patterns. What do you do when you're stressed? Scroll, snack, snap, write it down, not to shame yourself, but to understand yourself. Self-awareness is the first step to self-mastery, and the more clearly you see your habits, the easier it becomes to reshape them. Meditation doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't require a mountain retreat or incense. It requires a chair, a breath, and your attention. And journaling doesn't need to be poetic. It needs to be honest. Write badly if you must, but write, because in those pages you begin to spot the loops, the thoughts you've recycled for years, the stories you've told yourself that no longer serve you. And then there's the daily decision. Will I react or will I reflect? Stoics chose the latter. They paused, they questioned, they inserted space between impulse and action. And in that space, they found their power. You might slip, that's expected. But here's the truth. Missing a day doesn't break the chain, giving up does. So return, again and again. Return to the page, return to the breath, return to yourself. Because over time, this practice makes you light but unshakable, like bamboo in the wind. It bends but doesn't break. The secret to never getting angry or bothered by anyone lies not in avoiding conflict, but in mastering your perception of it. Most people believe peace is found in the absence of problems, but the Stoics believed peace was a skill, a kind of internal armor you forge deliberately, especially when things go wrong. If your calm depends on perfect conditions, it's not calm. It's convenience dressed as virtue. This is where most people fall into the trap. They spend their lives trying to change the world, trying to avoid rudeness, criticism, disrespect, thinking that if only people acted better, they could finally feel peace. But the Stoics flipped the script. They didn't expect people to be kind or fair or logical. They trained themselves to be unshakable regardless. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, "You will meet people today who are meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." And instead of bracing himself in anger, he reminded himself that these people are not obstacles. They are part of life, just like wind is part of the ocean. Think about that. He didn't see rude people as enemies. He saw them as weather. In other words, why get offended at the rain? This mindset doesn't make you weak, it makes you durable. Because once you stop expecting people to always be kind, you stop handing them the power to ruin your day when they aren't. Your power doesn't lie in controlling others. It lies in not letting others control you. Now, some people might say, "But if I don't get angry, aren't I letting them win?" The Stoics would laugh at that, because who's really winning? The person who stays calm and clear-headed, or the one who loses control? Seneca once said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." When something triggers you, don't pounce, don't fire back, just pause, breathe, question it, ask, "Is this worth my peace?" That one moment of pause, that breath between stimulus and response, that's where strength lives. And over time, those small acts of restraint stack up. You begin to rewrite your habits. You become someone who doesn't flinch at disrespect because you've built something stronger inside, clarity, and clarity is rare. Most people are chasing validation, applause, or revenge. But clarity? That's yours. You earn it. You keep it. No one can take it unless you give it away. Being unbothered doesn't mean being emotionless. It means you feel the wave of anger rise and choose not to surf it. You acknowledge the sting of insult and refuse to let it sink in. You hear the noise, but you don't become it. Imagine walking through a crowded street where people are yelling, bumping into each other, arguing, and you're walking calmly through the noise like it's wind. That's the Stoic ideal, not silence outside, but silence within. And here's the twist. The more you respond calmly, the more power you project. People may try to provoke you, but when they see they can't, they lose interest. Their fuel is your reaction. Starve them of it, and they run out of fire. You don't need to win arguments. You need to win your inner state. That's the real prize. Because once you've trained yourself to respond instead of react, you're free. Not because the world is softer, but because you are stronger. The real test of Stoic strength doesn't happen in quiet rooms or controlled environments. It happens in messy moments, when you're in a crowded office meeting and someone undercuts your idea in front of everyone. When you've been waiting in line for 20 minutes and someone strolls up and cuts in like they own the place. When your hard work is brushed aside by someone who didn't even read it. It's in those exact moments that your philosophy either crumbles or crystallizes. Because Stoicism isn't a bookshelf trophy. It's a practical tool, and it only works when you do. You don't train your mind for when life is gentle. You train it for when life throws elbows. You prepare for the storm so that when they come, and they will, you remain still inside. Most people walk through life completely reactive. Someone criticizes them, and it's like their entire nervous system gets hijacked. Their heart races, their face burns, and they respond without thinking. One mean tweet, and they spiral into an emotional avalanche. But the Stoic doesn't spiral. They observe. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." He didn't mean we should become robots. He meant we should stop outsourcing our emotions to strangers. If every insult shakes you, you've given everyone else the keys to your peace. That's not strength, that's emotional servitude. So how do you take the keys back? You build a habit of pause. Next time someone throws shade, resist the urge to immediately respond. Instead, step back, not physically, but mentally. Ask yourself, what's actually happening here? More often than not, it's not personal. They're projecting their stress, their envy, their unresolved issues, and you just happen to be the nearest target. When you begin to see this pattern, everything changes. You stop reacting and start noticing. That coworker who always finds something wrong with your ideas. Maybe they're insecure. That driver who honks even when you did nothing wrong. Maybe they're carrying rage from something else. You begin to see the world less as a series of personal attacks and more as a stage full of unhealed performers. And here's the twist. The calmer you remain, the more power you gain. Not the power to dominate, but the power to protect your own peace. Your silence becomes strength. Your stillness becomes a statement. And your self-control becomes a shield. Detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the ability to say, I see what's happening, but I don't need to get tangled in it. That's how the Stoic walks through the fire. Not without feeling, but without flinching. The world will always test you. The question is, will you hand over your peace at every provocation? Or will you guard it like something sacred? Because that's what it is. Your peace is sacred. Treat it like it. Stoicism isn't just about dodging anger. It's about constructing a kind of inner foundation so steady that no insult, no interruption, no provocation can shake it. The goal isn't to become cold or robotic. It's to become rooted in clarity, in principle, in peace. And when the winds of life start howling, as they always do, you stay grounded. You don't bend to every breeze or break under every storm. You stay intact. But let's be honest, that kind of strength doesn't show up by accident. You weren't born with it. No one is. It's not a gift, it's a craft. And like any craft, it demands practice. You have to train your mind the same way a fighter trains reflexes, not in the middle of a brawl, but long before the fight begins. Stoicism teaches us that the real battles aren't external. They're internal. The way you interpret what someone says, the way you decide what deserves your attention, the moments where you choose to either rise above or spiral down. So how do you train? You prepare, you rehearse, you reflect, you build emotional muscle. Slowly, repetitively, quietly. Every morning you journal about the kind of person you want to be, not in an Instagrammable way, in a way that actually holds your mind accountable. You write about your triggers, you track the moments you got reactive. You interrogate what made you flinch, and then you sit with it. When something stings, you don't just brush it off or blast motivational quotes over it. You study it. You let it teach you. Why did that bother me so much? What story did I tell myself about what happened? Was it even true? That's discipline. Over time, something powerful starts to happen. You begin to catch the heat before it becomes fire. You notice the flicker of irritation, and instead of fueling it, you take a breath. You watch the urge to lash out rise and then fall without acting on it. You respond with wisdom instead of reacting with emotion. You become, in a word, unshakable, and people notice. They try to get a rise out of you, and they fail. They expect you to react, and you don't. They push, and you simply don't move. That silence, that calm presence, that's not emptiness. That's power. Because when everyone else is ruled by emotion, the one who isn't becomes magnetic, reliable, respected. You don't need to bark louder or defend yourself at every turn. Your restraint speaks louder than any outburst. And that's when Stoicism stops being a theory on a page and becomes who you are. Not a practice you remember now and then, but a posture you carry every hour, every day. Mastery doesn't come when no one tests you. It comes when you're tested and still choose peace. The secret to never getting angry or bothered by anyone lies in this: don't let them set the terms of your peace. Most people walk around like walking control panels covered in invisible buttons, and they hand those buttons out freely, unknowingly, to everyone around them. Here, push this if you want me upset. Here, say this if you want me insecure. Here's my trigger for defensiveness. Here's the one for overthinking. And then when someone pushes it, they erupt, as if it wasn't predictable. Stoicism teaches us to take those buttons back, and better yet, to start uninstalling them. It's the radical idea that your emotions are not reflexes. They are decisions. Slow ones, messy ones, but decisions nonetheless. Just because someone tosses a stone in your direction doesn't mean you're obligated to catch it with your teeth. Just because someone makes a comment that stings doesn't mean you need to respond with a show of flames. That's not strength. That's choreography. Acting out the same old dance every time someone presses play. But here's the real twist. This doesn't mean you suppress your emotions. This doesn't mean you bottle them up, pretending you're some emotionless monk floating through life untouched. That's not what the Stoics did. That's not what real mastery looks like. This is not suppression. This is sovereignty. It's the quiet, steady realization that you are the final gatekeeper of your experience. That no matter how chaotic the world becomes, you still get to decide what gets in. That people can provoke, insult, criticize, or mock you, but unless you let it enter your mind, it dies outside the gates. Their chaos doesn't have to become yours. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." Simple words, massive freedom. You don't have to give meaning to everything. You don't have to turn every look into an insult, every delay into disrespect, every disagreement into a war. But freedom like this doesn't just arrive. You train for it. You rehearse it. You build it with repetition. That's why the Stoics practiced every single day. They didn't wait for life to test them. They tested themselves in advance. They practiced negative visualization, imagining being insulted, mocked, ignored, even harmed, not because they were pessimists, but because they understood this. What you prepare for can't destroy you. If you've already mentally rehearsed being disrespected, it doesn't catch you off guard. It doesn't own you. It becomes just another scene in a play you've already read. Seneca once said, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than necessary." But the reverse is also true. He who trains before it is necessary suffers less than expected. And over time, this daily mental discipline changes something deep in you. You begin to see provocations not as threats, but as tests, even opportunities. You recognize that every insult is just a boomerang, What people throw at you says more about their world than yours. Their frustration, it's a window into their fear. Their attack, it's often a mask for insecurity. And so instead of absorbing their chaos, you simply observe it. You become the calm in the storm, not because storms stop arriving, but because you stop letting them define your weather. That's not emotional detachment. That's emotional maturity, and it's rare. Because the truth is, most people will never even attempt this. Most people stay stuck in reactive mode for their entire lives. They get pulled into drama, yanked by offense, ruled by outrage. But you're choosing something else. You're choosing clarity over chaos, principle over performance, mastery over melodrama. And it's not about impressing anyone. It's not even about winning. It's about finally walking through life with your peace intact. You'll never control the world, but you can absolutely control what kind of person the world meets. And that kind of control, that's the strongest power there is. Let's be honest. Staying calm when everything is going your way is no great achievement. Anyone can smile when the sun is shining, when people are kind, when your name is praised and your efforts appreciated. That's not composure, that's comfort. The real test is what happens when the tides shift. When someone cuts you down publicly, questions your worth, mocks you, humiliates you. That's when your emotional training either shows up or it doesn't. This is where Stoicism separates itself from every shallow form of self-help and performative positivity. The Stoics didn't prepare for a perfect world. They prepared for this world. Messy, unpredictable, harsh, and often unfair. They understood that peace of mind wasn't something you found in isolation. It was something forged in the middle of conflict. Think about it. Anyone can appear noble in a quiet room. But what happens when you're interrupted mid-sentence, insulted in front of your team, dismissed when you've worked hard? What happens when you're treated unfairly, or someone twists your words to make you look bad? Most people collapse. They lash out. They let emotion run the show, because in that moment their identity feels threatened. And when identity feels under siege, the untrained mind panics. It scrambles to regain control, usually with anger, ego, or withdrawal. But the Stoic, they breathe, because they've trained for this. Seneca once said, "Fire tests gold, adversity tests men." And he meant it quite literally. Adversity wasn't to be avoided. It was the gym for the soul, a chance to build strength in the exact place most people break. So here's the shift. When things go wrong, don't flinch. Don't tighten up. Don't brace for emotional impact like a punch you can't avoid. Instead, lean in. Use the moment. Your reputation takes a hit? Good. Let that teach you detachment. You're insulted unfairly? Good. Let that show you the limits of ego. You feel humiliated in front of others? Even better. Let that crack the illusion that your worth depends on external approval. Every time the world tries to provoke you and fails, you grow. And that's not just philosophy. It's practical power, because something strange happens when you stop reacting the way people expect. You unsettle them, not by being aggressive, but by refusing to follow the script. Someone tries to anger you and you respond with stillness. That's confusing and oddly magnetic, because most people are used to escalation. But when you don't take the bait, they're left face to face with their own noise. This doesn't mean you become passive or weak. It means you choose power over performance. You rise above the chaos, not to be superior, but to stay aligned with who you are. The person who remains calm in the face of disrespect is not emotionless. They're emotionally sovereign. They know that rage is a leash others can tug. That offense is often bait disguised as principle, and they've chosen to stop being yanked around. So what does this look like in practice? It looks like hearing a cruel comment and pausing before responding. It looks like taking a breath instead of retaliating. It looks like walking away without the need to prove your dignity, not because you're afraid of conflict, but because your peace is too expensive to trade for a moment of ego. You begin to see life not as a battlefield, but as a dojo. Every interaction is a test, every insult a sparring partner, and every time you pass without flinching, your internal armor strengthens. The Stoics didn't want you to be cold. They wanted you to be centered. That's the highest form of respect. Not the kind others give you, but the kind you give yourself. The kind that doesn't get shattered when the world forgets your value. The kind that endures silently, no matter who tries to shake it. And when that kind of calm becomes your default, not a performance, not a trick, but a habit, you're no longer part of the emotional chaos around you. You become the anchor in the storm. The secret to never getting angry or bothered by anyone isn't really a secret at all. It's a daily choice, a way of being, a mental posture that you reinforce over and over until it becomes second nature. You start to see that your peace doesn't depend on how others treat you. It depends on how you train yourself to respond. And that shift changes everything. Because suddenly someone's bad mood isn't your invitation to react. Their insults aren't a mirror, they're a test. And their chaos, it doesn't belong in your nervous system. The Stoics never promised a perfect life. They didn't tell us we'd escape pain or avoid disrespect. But they did offer us something far more valuable, a path to freedom. Freedom from emotional slavery. Freedom from knee-jerk reactions. Freedom from the illusion that others need to behave a certain way for you to be okay. That's the real strength, to walk through life unshaken. Not because nothing touches you, but because nothing owns you. So here's a challenge. For the next 7 days, treat every insult, every irritation, every slight as training. The moment something gets under your skin, pause, breathe, ask yourself, is this worth my peace? Most of the time, it won't be. And in that tiny moment of awareness, you reclaim control. You become harder to provoke, easier to respect, and impossible to shake. And once you taste that kind of emotional sovereignty, you won't want to give it up. If you found yourself nodding, remembering a time when you reacted too quickly, or maybe realizing how often you give away your calm, you're not alone. This journey isn't about perfection. It's about training. Slow, deliberate, relentless training of the mind. Let's keep building that kind of strength together. Remember, people who own their reactions usually end up owning their peace. Calm minds tend to click subscribe. That's it for now.